I gave an AI agent one instruction: build my entire data pipeline. No code from me. No step-by-step instructions, no hand-holding. Just one prompt. And what happened next surprised me. Some parts were incredibly good, some parts were completely wrong. So today I'm going to show you exactly what happened, and whether you should actually trust AI to build your data pipelines. If you're a data engineer, you've probably heard the hype. AI agents are going to replace pipeline builders. But there's a big difference between using AI as a co-pilot and actually giving AI the entire job. Most of us use AI for things like autocomplete, generating SQL, fixing Python errors, or writing small pieces of code. But what happens when you say, here's my raw data, build the entire pipeline? That's exactly what I wanted to test. So I gave an AI agent one prompt, sat back, and recorded everything it did. Here's the exact prompt I used, and honestly, it's ridiculously simple. I told the agent, build a data pipeline that ingests raw sales data, cleans and transforms it, and loads it into a data warehouse, ready for analytics. That's it. I didn't give it a database schema. I didn't tell it which transformations to use. I didn't give it an architecture diagram. And I didn't tell it how the tables should look. I wanted to see whether the agent could figure those things out by itself. For this experiment, I used Your AI Agent tool. The source was a raw CSV sales export, and the destination was a cloud data warehouse, so the basic flow was simple: raw data, transformation, warehouse, and finally analytics. The first thing I wanted to see was whether the agent could understand the raw data and design a reasonable schema. Because this is where things get interesting, I gave it messy sales data containing things like customer information, product details, order dates, quantities, prices, and other fields. Instead of simply copying everything into one table, the agent analyzed the columns and proposed a structured schema. It correctly identified the data types. It separated customer-related information from sales information. It also introduced keys and relationships between the tables, even though I never explicitly asked it to do that. And honestly, this was the first moment where I thought, okay, this is actually impressive. A lot of the initial work that normally requires manual analysis was done automatically, but there was an important catch. A schema can look perfect on paper and still be wrong for your actual business requirements, and that's something we're going to come back to later. Once the schema was ready, I gave the agent the next challenge: actually build the pipeline. That meant 4 major steps: extract, validate, transform, and load. The agent generated the extraction code. It added validation for missing and malformed values. It handled null values. It created the transformation logic. And finally, it generated the loading process for the warehouse. But then it went one step further. It also created the scheduling logic so the pipeline could run automatically. This is where I started comparing the time. A pipeline like this could easily take me most of a working day, depending on the requirements and the environment. The AI agent completed the initial implementation in roughly 3 hours, and remember, I wasn't writing the pipeline alongside it. I was mostly reviewing what it was doing. So, what actually worked? First, the code was surprisingly clean and readable. It wasn't just one giant script. The logic was broken into understandable steps. Second, it caught data quality issues that I might not have noticed immediately, especially missing and null values. Third, speed. The biggest advantage was simply how quickly it could produce a working first version. And fourth, documentation. The agent explained what the different parts of the pipeline were doing without me having to document every single step manually. So if I look at this from a productivity perspective, there's a clear advantage. AI can remove a huge amount of repetitive first draft work. But here's where the experiment gets really interesting. Because the pipeline wasn't perfect. The first issue was currency formatting. There was an edge case in the source data that the agent didn't handle correctly. The pipeline worked, but under that specific condition, it could produce incorrect results. The second issue was time zone. The agent made an assumption about the source data's time zone, and that assumption wasn't correct for my actual environment. That might sound like a small issue, But in a production data pipeline, a time zone mistake can completely change daily reporting numbers. Then there was indexing. The initial solution didn't include a proper indexing strategy. I had to specifically ask the agent to analyze query performance and recommend indexes. And this is the biggest lesson from the experiment. The pipeline looked good, it ran, the code was clean, but I still wouldn't ship it directly to production. Why? Because AI doesn't automatically understand your business rules, your data contracts, your production environment, or every edge case in your data. That's where human review becomes critical. So let's look at the final numbers. The initial build took roughly 3 hours instead of what would normally take around a full working day for this type of task. That's roughly a 78% reduction in development time for this experiment. But here's the number that's even more important. Human review was still required. I checked the schema, I reviewed the transformations, I tested the edge cases, I validated the results, and only after that would I consider moving it toward production. So my conclusion is pretty simple. The AI agent didn't replace me. It replaced the first draft. After doing this experiment, there are 4 things I would take away. Number 1, speed is real. AI agents can dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes to get from an idea to a working first version. Number 2, review is non-negotiable. Never assume that because the code runs, the pipeline is correct. Number 3, context is everything. The more information you give the agent about your data, your architecture, your business rules, and your requirements, the better the result will be. And number 4, I think the role of the data engineer is changing. Instead of spending all of our time writing every line of pipeline code manually, we're going to spend more time designing systems, defining requirements, validating results, and directing AI agents. We're moving from simply writing pipelines to engineering and reviewing pipelines. So, should you let AI build your next data pipeline? My answer is yes. But don't let it ship the first version. Let AI build the draft. Let AI generate the code. Let AI find the obvious problems. And then let a human engineer review, test, and validate the result. Because the future probably isn't AI versus data engineers, it's data engineers who know how to use AI versus data engineers who don't. If you want the full code and the exact prompts I used in this experiment, I've linked them in the description. And if you want more real-world experiments with AI, data engineering, and AI agents, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.